Hello and welcome to the Majlis podcast, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty's current affairs talk show focusing on Central Asia. I'm Bruce Pannier, host of the Majlis and author of the weekly Central Asia in Focus newsletter. Central Asia's trade with Europe has been severely hampered by Russia's war on Ukraine and subsequent sanctions the European Union imposed on Russia for the war. Much of Central Asia's trade with Europe and with Turkey passed through Russia, a legacy of the Soviet era when all roads west from Central Asia went through Russia. But now Central Asia is exploring new routes west that avoid Russian territory and go across the Caspian Sea and through the Caucasus. What are the options for Central Asia? What infrastructure is in place to reorient trade westward? And what still needs to be done to open these trade routes to Turkey and Europe? To discuss all this, I am joined by Valijan Turakulov, who is a PhD assistant professor at the business school Akfa University Tashkent. He earned his PhD in international trade at Inhai University, South Korea. His research interest is Central Asian countries' regional and trade policies. Yunus Sharifli is a research intern at the Central Asian Barometer. He also works as a junior research fellow at the Caucasian Center for International Relations and Strategic Studies at the Topchubasha Center in Azerbaijan. Thank you for joining me today. And Valijan, I'd like to start with you. For the benefit of our audience, can you give us an idea of how Central Asia's trade with Europe has been affected by the loss of trade routes through Russia?
Actually, if you look at a little bit about the history of the Central Asia, is Central Asia was the part of the center of the Silk Road before then. In Portuguese, some of the traders, they found a maritime route, and then Central Asia kind of lost it is the importance in the a Silk Road. And after that, after several years, the Russia came in, to the Central Asia, and then, even though we got independence as an independent country, we still depend on Russian corridor, in order to trade with European Union. Even not only European Union, even some of the Eastern countries, for example, Japan. I know some of the exporters from my country, they trade through Kazakhstan and then Russia and then Vladivostok. That part, it's so far they've just bypassed China and asked them why, because of the some of the obstacles in China. Even for example, the language obstacles, because still traditionally, historically, we are close to the Russian. They still prefer going through the Russia to any other country. Okay, and then the Europe was one of the the regions that usually go through Turkey or the Russia to the Europe. And then we were happy. Let's say, for example, as Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan among Central Asian countries are enjoying GSP Plus of the European Union. We were about to enjoy from these preferences. However, the Russia made very sharp turn in this policy, and then because of the Russia invaded Ukraine, now we are even losing the transport corridor through the Russia. That's why I think this discussion will be very useful for all of us and also for our listeners, because it's a very hot topic that we have to discuss, because it's the today's discussed topic that really impacts on the future of the Central Asian trade policy, as this middle corridor success literally the success of the trade between the Central Asia and to the Europe. So that is my introduction.
Okay, that's great. And Yunus, I want to give you a chance to talk about the same thing. Not only how much of an impact this has been on Central Asia's trade with Europe, but can you give me also a little bit of an idea about what infrastructure is in place? What do they got for roads and railways? And we'll get to the China, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan railway in a minute, because I know that's something you just wrote an excellent article on that. But can you give us an idea of what the infrastructure looks like in Central Asia that doesn't go through Russia? What are the other options if they don't want to go through Russia?
Okay, actually, I would like to say that not even after the Russia-Ukraine war, but before the Russia-Ukraine war, especially since the 1990s, when the Central Asian countries announced their independence, the Central Asian countries started to construct both hard infrastructure and the soft infrastructure. The meaning of the hard infrastructure is that building the railway, terminal, port, and dry ports. And also, meaning of the soft infrastructure is about the digitalization of the customs, the facilitating of the control with, for example, the border, for example, in the China-Kazakh border, and also simplifying the rules, unification of the tariffs, and other things. Generally, after the Russia-Ukraine war, we saw that Central Asian countries, especially the Kazakhstan, I would like to emphasize that Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan is the main player in the Central Asian countries because they try to diversify the routes, invest the railway infrastructure, try to increase their capacity in both dry ports and the port, especially Kazakhstan, and they try to attract more cargo from the northern route, which goes through the Russia, from to northern corridor to middle corridor, which start from the China, goes through Kazakhstan, and goes through the South Caucasus via Caspian Sea and reach Turkey. In terms of the infrastructure, we saw that actually, I would like to first start with the Kazakhstan. Since 2000, Kazakhstan improved its railway infrastructure and modernized generally throughout the country of the railway infrastructure, also cooperate with the regional countries, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Kyrgyzstan, also cooperate with the South Caucasian countries for enhanced multimodal transportation. In the context of this topic, the middle corridor, especially the middle corridor is important. The middle corridor is a transport route connecting China to Western Europe that chart a passage between the Russia in the north and Iran in the south. The routes at the moment is especially important because when we check the news, since the Russia-Ukraine war began, we saw that the middle corridor seems one of the potential routes which can offset the losses, of companies due to the Russia-Ukraine war, because at the moment, due to the ethical values and because of the sanctions on Russia, both European companies and Chinese companies try to diversify the routes and try to find another route which bypass the Russia. In this context, middle corridor is important, and Kazakhstan is especially important. And Kazakhstan at the moment try to invest China-Kazakh border. For example, we have the interesting developments in the China-Kazakh border. For example, announcement of the second multifunctional terminal, the station in the DOS terminal, which increase the capacity of the China-Kazakh border and facilitate the much better transportation from China to Europe. Second improvement is about the creation and building of the third terminal between the China-Kazakh border, and also important increasing capacity, and announcement of the new information about the simplifying the custom rules and reduce general the controlling process. The all developments said us that the Kazakhstan and also other regional countries try to improve multimodal transportation through from China to Europe, try to increase their strategic importance, and try to get more cargo, because the more cargo means that more transit fee, and also the locate in throughout the supply chain from China to Europe. In addition to the Kazakhstan, I would like to emphasize that Uzbekistan's initiative, for example, we saw that last month, the Uzbekistan proposed new corridor, which starts from the China and goes through the Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan. One branch goes through the Iran, one branch goes through the South Caucasus via Caspian Sea. This is the important developments, like the regional competition between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan in terms of the attracting more cargo. And we saw that at the moment, the Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and China announced that the construction date of the China, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan railway is extremely important for the multimodal transportation. Generally, I can say that at the moment there are a lot of advantage in terms of the middle corridor, and also in terms of the corridor which goes through the Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan. But there are also some problems. For example, the congestion problem, China-Kazakh border. Generally, the decisions about that China-Kyrgyzstan railway still need to more accurate information, because we know that last 20 years that Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan talks about the realization of this project, but there are a lot of delays. But finally, I can say that maybe in the media we saw a lot of information that middle corridor seems a potential alternative to the Russian route, but actually in the short term and medium term, we can say that the middle corridor has a potential to offset the international companies' losses from the Russian corridor. But middle corridor countries or the new route from the Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan can't replace totally the northern corridor, which goes through the Russia. But in the future, For example, Turkish officials especially argue that there's a possibility that 30% of the cargo which goes through from the Russian territory, there's a possibility that 30% of the cargo draw to middle corridor and for example, the route goes through the Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and generally reduce the reliance on Russia.
Excellent. Thank you. Wow, that was a real complete explanation of that. Valijan, I want to come back to you for a second here too, and we'll get to you in a second also, Yunus, because it's the same question. Twice this month I've seen reports about the Uzbek president speaking with the Azerbaijani president, and we know that Kazakh President Tokayev was in Azerbaijan on August 24th to meet with Ilham Aliyev. Also, can you talk a little bit about the warming relations between Uzbekistan and Azerbaijan, and more generally about the warming relations between Central Asia and Azerbaijan as they see this potential new or opening of our new route west, which obviously involves Azerbaijan. It's a very important link then on that.
Thank you very much for this question. We saw that the last 2 months, actually last 3 months, that generally there is a development between Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, relation of the Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan. We saw that when the President Shavkat Mirziyoyev visited Azerbaijan, we saw that there are also new agreements in the context of the logistic cooperation. Generally, also after Mr. Shavkat Mirziyoyev left the country, there is also interaction between the business sectors and the economic sectors, and they try to propose new economic corridor or new transportation corridor from China to Europe. As I noted before, at the moment, Uzbekistan try to also play important role in the context of the China-European Union railway trade. And in this context, we saw that, for example, we have a news that Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, and Turkey signed new agreement to simplify the custom rules, and they signed Tashkent Accord is extremely important in this context because they emphasize that every time the multimodal transportation from the China to Europe. Generally, the main reason of that, the development of the Azerbaijan-Uzbekistan relationship is also due to the Russia-Ukraine war, because both states see that there are opportunities to attract more cargo, attract more international companies, also modernize their infrastructure, because I would like to say that in comparison with the past years, we see that generally improvement of the infrastructure, not just in the Central Asia, but South Caucasus, the main player is the state. For example, Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan. But at the moment, due to the Russia-Ukraine war, both Chinese and European companies, also in terms of private and state-led companies, try to invest the middle corridor or the corridor which starts from the China and goes through Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan. And third player, in addition to the state and international companies, the third actors we saw that involved the improvement of the infrastructure in Central Asia and South Caucasus is the financial international organizations or regional organizations, we can say that. For example, Asia Development Bank. Asia Development Bank involving of the modernization of both Kazakhstan, infrastructure and Uzbekistan, and also Azerbaijan and Georgia. And recently, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development announced that it invests Kazakhstan railway bond for improved efficiency, reduce cost, reduce the time consuming, improve the both port of the Kazakhstan and the railway infrastructure. In this context, we said that one of the most important reasons of the recent interaction between the Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan is about to use the opportunity, attract more cargo, try to attract more investment from the international companies and international organizations, and play strategically important role, not for the South Caucasus and Central Asia, but generally between the China and the European Union.
No, this is excellent, and thank you, because we're going to do a lot in the second part of the show about the international efforts to try to improve the line. This next, actually, Yunus, you can comment on that too, about the connection to Azerbaijan. But what I also want to talk about here too is that we're talking about a Trans-Caspian. It was at some point of this trade route, you have to go across the Caspian Sea. Now we know that the ports have been developed on both sides of the Caspian Sea. You got Kurik, you got Aktau, you got Turkmenbashi City, and on the other side we got Alat. But is that sufficient? I mean, is the capacity of these ports sufficient? And especially on the Azerbaijani side, can they handle all the traffic coming to and going from Central Asia?
Thank you very much for again question. Actually, it's a really important question because we saw that, as I noted before, there's some advantage of the middle corridor or general the route which starts from the Central Asia and goes through the South Caucasus, but there's also some congestion problems. For example, one of the most important problems, the port capacity, not in the Azerbaijan, but also the capacity of the Kazakhstan ports and the Turkmenistan ports. But we saw that both Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and Turkmenistan, they try to invest and increase the capacity. We recently saw that there's an announcement of the new data that already both Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan reach maximum capacity. This is important news because this means that in future there's a possibility the creation of the bottlenecks and the congestion problems. The second problem is in this context is the shortage of the ferry and the shortage of the vessel which play key role for sending cargo, for example, from Kazakhstan port to Azerbaijan port or from Turkmenistan port to Azerbaijan port. But in this, the both example is important, and we saw that, for example, recently Azerbaijan President Mr. Ilham Aliyev announced that we need to start construction of the second stage of the Baku International Trade Port. There are also great capacity to attract more cargo and increase the efficiency of transportation through Azerbaijan. And we saw that in the Kazakhstan side that they also announced that they want to create container hub in the Akto port. And also they have a plan to build 10 vessels for cargo transportation from one side of the Caspian Sea to the other side. And also Azerbaijan side decided to build more vessels, not just for the Caspian Sea, but for also the Black Sea. This is important because we saw that both Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan try to invest not just their country, but also try to invest and improve efficiency through the middle corridor in Georgia, in the Turkey, in the Black Sea. And at the moment, I can say that there is a bottleneck problem. And also both countries, not just Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, but Turkmenistan ports reach their maximum capacity. But there are still the playing field that after a while, when they start to the construction and when they finish the new terminals in the both the Akto port, Turk port, or Baku International Trade Port, or Turkmenbashi port, there is a great opportunity and great capacity to handle more cargo from China to Europe.
Great. Thank you very much. And Valijan, I'm going to come back to you for a minute, too, because I know Uzbekistan has been paying a lot of attention to their ability to ship goods or accept goods to both the Kazakhstani ports and to the port at Turkmenbashi also. Isn't this true? Can you tell us a little bit about Uzbekistan's efforts to get to these ports?
Yeah, as you know, when the President Shavkat Mirziyoyev came in 2016, he kind of started making a lot of efforts, to have a corridors to the southeast, the countries or the European countries or the China or the Japan and the Korea, those regions. And one of the efforts he made it there was two kind of dilemmas in front of the Uzbek government at the time, like whether they want to have a corridor through the Afghanistan, Pakistan, or the Turkmenistan to the Iran. They ended up having a port, kind of a corridor through the Afghanistan and also the Pakistan. And the reason why they did not choose the closest, Bandar Abbas, the port, which is located in Iran, is it has two reasons. The one of the reason is that, Iran still, has a lot of, sanctions from the West. That's why the government did not want to have any current risk, and also future risk. And also, when I talked to some of the government officials, they were also saying that, the Turkmenistan is a kind of a country, they can, change their position anytime. That's why they didn't want to make any risk of this, multi-million, projects. Even though the Afghanistan is a war, they still chose that one, and then now they're, working on this. Even, you talked about the, Azerbaijan relationship with the Uzbekistan. Actually, Uzbekistan now trying to be trying to have very good relationship with all of the Turkish-speaking countries, especially Turkey, Azerbaijan, and in other Central Asian countries. And then 3 weeks ago, there was a meeting between ministers of Uzbekistan, Turkey, and also Azerbaijan. And they made a lot of, relationship. They made a lot of agreements among them. And also one of the, the thing that really goes to our topic is that our Uzbekistan government offered kind of Turkey, Caucasus, Central Asia, South Asia via Afghanistan, corridor. in order to, like going from the Azerbaijan, from the Turkey to the Europe to the south, the east countries like Indian Ocean.
Okay, great. Okay, we're going to pause here for a second. We're going to bring Sherzad in, and we'll start the second half of the show. This is the Majlis podcast, and we are talking about the options to replace Central Asia's trade routes through Russia. And I am joined by Sherzad Eraliyev, a postdoctoral researcher at Lund University, Sweden, and the University of Helsinki, Finland. He's published on migration in Russia and Turkey, state and society relations in Central Asia. He's the co-author of the newly published book, The Political Economy of Non-Western Migration Regimes, Central Asian Migrant Workers in Russia and Turkey. We also have Valijan Turakulov, PhD, assistant professor at Business School, Akfa University, Tashkent. He earned his PhD in international trade at Inha University, South Korea, and his research interest is Central Asian countries' regional and trade policies, and Yunus Sharifli. He's a research intern at Central Asian Barometer. He also works as a junior research fellow at the Caucasian Center for International Relations and Strategic Studies at the Top Chubashev Center in Azerbaijan. Thank you all for being here. I'm Bruce Pannier, the host of the show, and let's talk about this. And we've been discussing some of the hardware. I think that was Yunus used that term earlier. That to get these trade route, what's in place right at the moment to try to move goods across Central Asia. Sherzad, since you just got here, I'm kind of curious about what we've talked a little bit about what's in place. But if they're going to replace the northern route, if they're going to try to bypass Russia and have the same kind of trade volumes that they have through the northern route, what still needs to be done in Central Asia to accomplish this?
Are you asking from the Central Asian perspective, or are you asking about the global players who have interest in this project?
Let's start with the Central Asian governments themselves, and then we'll move to the global, and then you can comment on the global players right after that, okay?
All right. I think from the Central Asian perspective, the first and foremost thing is the build-up of the development of the infrastructure. I don't know how much you have discussed this issue before I joined the show, but I think even with Kazakhstan now speedily building up and expanding its two seaports on the Caspian shore and building up its railway infrastructure inside on its territory, we still need more should be done in terms of building and expanding this kind of infrastructure. So the first thing is investments in infrastructure. That's from Central Asian perspective. And if you're asking about what other global players or those stakeholders who are interested in the development of projects, I think it's obvious that they need to invest a lot of money in building those ports and expanding those ports, starting with Kazakhstan, or also at the same time Turkmenistan's shore of the Caspian Sea, and of course we have Azerbaijan, and of course on the western part, I think those available ports of Poti and Batumi of Georgia are not enough to serve transport large amounts of freight if you need to expand this project.
No, this is great, and we'll get to I certainly want to get to Anaklia here in just a moment. Valijan, you have your hand up. You wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize on the thing that like Central Asian countries are kind of overlooking. So like as previously just Mr. Yunus Sharifli mentioned about hard and soft infrastructure, and to my best knowledge, like so far, what the Central Asian countries are focusing on is that they're focusing on more hard infrastructure. For example, like building up roads, okay. And then, something tangible, but they're kind of, ignoring, but not focusing on the soft infrastructure, which also plays very important role to, for the goods, to go through the corridor smoothly. Like for example, a software, infrastructure can be, the custom union, non-tariff barriers or the transaction fees, all of them. So, for example, one of the kind of, corner partner of the project, which is Uzbekistan, is not, yet, like part of the WTO. Or like we can just say that, there is no a harmonization kind of a system that lets the goods, like go smoothly in the, across the corridor. That's why I just want to emphasize that, like when we talk and also when they are doing their project, they should not only focus on, hard infrastructure, building something tangible, but also like making everything, like smooth across the project. They also have to focus on the soft infrastructure. So that is what I want to.
No, that's great, and thank you, because this will be the next topic. And I did want to mention that a lot of the hard infrastructure, and thank you, Yunus, again for bringing that up, because these are great terms for us to use. A lot of this is the Asian Development Bank's Central Asian Regional Economic Cooperation Project that started in 2001. There's 6 corridors through there. Of course, we got the Belt and Road Initiative. That's played a big role in opening up and the construction of some of these routes at the same time. But we have a good point here about the harmonization of rules and regulations, tariffs, things like that. I mean, this is also a huge obstacle to smooth trade. Shirzad, I'm going to bring you back in since you to give you some equal time here, since we had some technical problems bringing you in the first half of the show. I mean, just how much of a problem is that? We've heard that the government still don't have, in Central Asia, haven't worked that out yet. How is that going to work out? What happens when goods get to the border of Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, or Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan or something? I mean, how much is left to do with that?
Well, I think Valijan has already, he mentioned the very important factor, this soft infrastructure. And since I'm not an expert on these trade issues, I think maybe Valijan will be more qualified to answer what is really going on this matter.
Okay, Valijan, if you want to add something to that, and then I'll ask you, Yunus, to comment on it also.
Actually, like it was my PhD topic to learn the hard infrastructure and soft infrastructure of the Central Asian countries. What I call is that, usually hard infrastructure is something, like nature made, and then soft infrastructure is kind of handmade, because like, we are landlocked countries, and, kind of luckily, Uzbekistan is double landlocked country. So, yeah, that is a nature made that, we cannot avoid. But at least we can kind of ease some of the soft infrastructure, like reducing the tariffs, like eliminating some of the non-tariff barriers, the license, certificates, these kind of things. And then we can kind of reduce the soft infrastructure to make the trade more smooth. But, like this is not what's going on actually nowadays, except let's say the Kazakhstan, but also many in, Central Asian countries, especially in Uzbekistan. What we're focusing on is that still we are focusing on, hard infrastructure too much. And then we are kind of partially focusing on the soft infrastructure. That's why, I read some of the researches about the middle corridor, that it would be great, it would be like much kind of, like faster corridor if, the countries which are the part of the middle corridor have kind of trade agreement, kind of mutual trade agreement with each other. So that is one of the solution, or at least they should not only work on building the bridge or the roads or those kind of things, but also they have to start building a kind of harmonized a system that, the goods goes smoothly. However, like to my best knowledge and, to my previous, the researches, there are not a lot of things are going on in terms of the soft infrastructure.
I would like to add something about the soft infrastructure. First, I would like to say that why soft infrastructure is important, and why, if it's not improved, and how it's created new problems. I would like to emphasize again the clear example. For example, in the China-Kazakh border, we said that there are some problem in the January, and this problem is directly related to the soft infrastructure problem. But soft infrastructure problem, for example, inefficient border control. Inefficient border control is related to the non-transparent control, and this increased the informal cost of the cargoes, and also formal cost of the cargoes, increase the time consuming, and create a lot of challenges and problems for the international companies, because we know that the supply chain logic is worked in the context of the just-in-time principle. If this principle not work, we saw that private companies or the state-led companies started to try to find another route, because they need to acute time. They need to know that when their cargo reach destination, they need to accurate and calculate that arrival time of the cargo to China or the European destination. In this context, after the Russia-Ukrainian war, we saw that actually I agree totally with that value, John. Yes, the Central Asian countries and the South Caucasian countries in the past mostly pay attention to hard infrastructure. But after the Russia-Ukrainian war, we have a clear example that for example, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Georgia announced that they create a joint venture called the Eurasian Alliance. This is similar to cooperation between that Russia, Belarus, and Kazakhstan. This is important because they try to unify the tariffs, reduce the barriers, unifying tariffs and customs, and facilitating much efficient custom process and facilitating fast border controls. We have also another example. Just I think 1 week ago, we saw that Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Iran signed an agreement to reduce the cost of tariff and also unifying the international trade regime. We also finally another example that Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, and Turkey also announced that after the Tashkent Accord, they also want to create a system for simplifying the rules, facilitating the fast border controls, and also increase the transparency. We see that both in Central Asia and in South Caucasus and with Turkey, they all try to, at the moment, not just try to develop hard infrastructure, but also they try to improve soft infrastructure, because we know that without the soft infrastructure, maybe we have a railway, but this railway is not enough. We need to calculate the time, reduce the cost, reduce the time, increase the transparency, and give the chance to companies to calculate when their cargo arrive or reach destination. In this context, after the Russia-Ukraine war, we saw a lot of examples and a lot of agreement between the Central Asian and South Caucasian countries that they try to simplify the rules.
Now we get the question of who's going to pay for all this stuff, right? I mean, the Central Asian states certainly are being hit hard by what the economic situation that's been created from the Russia's war in Ukraine, and China. And Eunice, in your article that you wrote about the China-Kyrgyz-Uzbek Railway, you mentioned that project, for example, is going to be more than $4 billion. And the Chinese don't feel that they should be responsible for paying that whole bill, meaning that the Kyrgyz and Uzbeks are going to have to come up with some of this money too. I haven't seen the European Union states promising huge amounts of money for opening up this trade route. Turkey, of course, has its own financial problems at the moment too. So you're going to need some money to open up these railways, these shipping routes, to get the roads all built. We mentioned Anaklia briefly. I mean, they started to build. It was supposed to be the biggest port in the Black Sea, but of course, they've certainly reduced their goals for that because they're running out of financing. I mean, how much money should the European Union, for instance, be willing to put into this and help finance? Who can help the Central Asians and Azerbaijan and Georgia to open up these routes? And I'll start with Sherzad, please.
In answering your question, I think, it depends everything on, I think what I know already is the EU has increased its financial aid to Azerbaijan already. I think it was, this issue of financing has its implications between this on the topic of this Azerbaijan-Armenian relations and Azerbaijan's growing importance. But I think part of the money also is supposed to cover the expenses of Azerbaijan building infrastructure that would help facilitate or improve the capacity of this middle corridor. I think initially the EU, at least for the last in 2021, the EU initially promised $150 million in financial aid, and which was later increased to $2 billion US, I think. And that's not enough to build large infrastructure projects, but I think that's also incentivizing. And at the same time, we should also keep in mind that those transit countries, say Georgia, Azerbaijan, or Kazakhstan, they are the number one beneficiaries also. So it's in their interest to seek for investment, to seek for money. And I'm not sure if China is absolutely unwilling to cover the expenses of the China, Kyrgyz, Uzbek railroad. I think at least they will be somehow also investing.
Okay, great. Thank you. Because I think that's only fair too. Well, John, considering if we look at this as a middle corridor project, right? Now that presumes that this is a trade route between China and the European Union that just happens to run through the Caucasus and Central Asia at the same time. Now, if China and European Union are the big beneficiaries of this, then it would seem to make sense that China and the European Union would be willing to help finance this to a huge degree, I would imagine, since they're going to get more out of this than anybody probably. How do you feel about that?
I think so far we have seen a lot of projects like Belt and Road Initiative. For example, like South Korean first female President Park Geun-hye. She also had a initiative, and then Moon Jae-in, she also had a Northern Policy Initiative, and then India. So like many countries, usually big countries, they have at least initiative to make a road, and then China's Belt and Road Initiative was very realistic until the war and conflict started between Russia and Ukraine. And I feel I think when it comes to the final who financed this project, if you look at this whole corridor, on one side there is a China, which is a big factory, and then in the other side we will see a big market, which is Europe, and then in the middle some of the kind of relatively smaller countries. That's why I believe there's two giant factory in the market. They should have some investment in this project, so that the countries which I say the Central Asian countries should get benefit from it, and also it should be kind of from Central Asian countries' perspective, should be kind of opening up their market, and also improving their soft infrastructure. They should kind of promise to the China and then the European Union to make to pay back of their generosity. So I believe those two giant China and Europe, they should invest in this project. That this is my the thinkings to my own research.
Okay, thank you, Wally-Can. Okay, and Yunus, we're going to come to you. And I'm remembering a moment in late August 2018, after they had signed the Caspian Convention, and Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev was meeting with then German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and they were talking about the possibility of doing a Trans-Caspian natural gas pipeline. And Aliyev said if Turkmenistan was serious about it, then they should have to put up some of their money, like Azerbaijan had done to do the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan oil pipeline and the Baku-Tbilisi-Erzurum natural gas pipeline. Is it fair to ask the countries in Central Asia and the Caucasus to put up money too, or should the burden fall on the two endpoints of this route, meaning the European Union and China?
Actually, I would like to say that since 1990s, Azerbaijan, as I noted, by not just try to improve the railway infrastructure or generally the port infrastructure in the Azerbaijan, but also try to create the regional trans-stop, for example, between Azerbaijan and Georgia. They invest also Georgian railway infrastructure. We can saw this in the Baku-Tbilisi railway, as you know, so people also in the energy trade. And at the moment, if you consider that there's a financing problem, actually the financing problem is that maybe before the talk about the financing problem, we need to talk, for example, how the countries really want to realize the project. If we talk about that energy trade or energy cooperation between Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan, or if we talk about that general transportation cooperation between Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, we saw that at the moment there are both sides, both Central Asian side and South Caucasian side, interested into develop both energy cooperation and also transportation cooperation in logistical cooperation. This is extremely important. In this context, we said that, for example, if we analyzed Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan, we saw that they try to improve their infrastructure with their own money, their own budget, by the way of the public-private partnership, especially Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan. Now, Uzbekistan recently also the converted strategy and adapt this the reality. If we consider that, we can say that yes, Azerbaijan has again chance to help the Central Asian countries, for example, in Turkmenistan, to improve to energy cooperation or invest in energy infrastructure and also the logistical, for example, railway infrastructure or the port infrastructure. But we can say that just Azerbaijan's effort is not enough, because at the moment, as I noted before, we have the international companies, for example, the cargo companies, European railway companies, such as the Norwegian Logistics, the rail cargo, the rail cargo, and other companies. They not just try to involve in the middle corridors, or they not just try to involve the Central Asian routes, but they also emphasize that we need to invest and improve the corridor efficiency. In addition to companies, as I noted before, Asia Development Bank, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and also some banks and agency, for example, the United States Agency for International Development announced that they want to invest the middle corridor, the multimodal transportation in the Central Asia. If we compare with the past, we know that the three actors, state, companies, and international and regional organizations, try to invest and improve the whole multimodal transportation to Central Asia and the South Caucasus.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, and I want to thank all three of you too. Unfortunately, we are out of time. We try to keep this podcast certainly under an hour, and better if it's 50 minutes or 45 minutes. So I do want to thank you once again. So Yunus Sharifli, a research intern at Central Asian Barometer, Sherzad Aliyev, postdoctoral researcher at Lund University in Sweden, and Valijan Torakula, PhD assistant professor at Business School Akfa University in Tashkent. Big thank you to my producer in Washington, Nathan Shoemaker, our Majlis podcast producer. And a reminder that you can subscribe to the Majlis podcast or the Central Asia in Focus newsletter by visiting RFARL's website at rfarl.org. Thank you very much, and we'll be back next week.